Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Okay, let's just dive right into this fascinating explainer. Today, we are absolutely dissecting the thematic character arc of Mira. She's that incredible protagonist who evolves from this totally simple, unassuming glass mender into a devastating guardian against demonic illusions. Honestly, for any fantasy literature student out there, Mira's journey in chapter 142 of the Human Raw Power saga is literally a masterclass in character development. We're going to look closely at exactly how her power reveals the profound and often terrifying difference between surface illusions and true intentions. Plus, we'll explore how she manages to navigate the incredibly intense moral dilemmas of quite literally holding up a mirror to a fractured world. It's a wild ride, so let's get into it.
So here is our quick roadmap for today's discussion. First up, the origins of the broken mirror. Then, the mechanics of magical reflection, followed by forging alliances through truth. After that, we'll hit the tactics of humble shards, the burden of empathy, and finally, witness to the next power.
All right, starting things off with section 1, Origins of the Broken Mirror and Her Awakening in Verglass. To really understand Mira, we have to understand where she comes from, because the history of the low glasslands deeply shaped her understanding of reality and raw power. Mira's origins are rooted in pure, gritty, practical survival. She lived in Verglass, which was this town built entirely around a ruined observatory. Now, the people of Verglass were pragmatic to the core. I'm talking about folks who feared famine and taxes way more than they ever feared demons. But they did have this one major superstition. They kept all their mirrors covered. Why? Because they were terrified of demonic messengers of pride. Mira, though, she didn't buy into that for a second. To her, a mirror wasn't some mystical doorway. It was just silvered glass and light. Period. She'd actually absorbed this really beautiful practical philosophy from her father, the idea that glass remembers its first shape. She truly believed every single shattered fragment held a tiny, stubborn loyalty to its original form, and that broken things didn't want to be dangerous. They just wanted the mercy of being made whole again. She was just a highly relatable, grounded person living a quiet life. But as you probably guessed, that innocent worldview completely shatters. When demonic influence finally arrived in Veriglass, it didn't come with, giant monsters breaking down the town gates. It was so much more insidious. It came as illusions of comfort. Suddenly, old men looked in the mirror and saw themselves as young again. Gifty people saw entirely clean hands. The mirrors became kinder than the actual truth. Mira realized just how much danger they were in when she looked at her own reflection, and it smiled at her before she even moved her face. Talk about a terrifying moment, right? And that is exactly when the raw power awakened. As her entire town essentially sleepwalked into the night, just blindly following these false promises, Mira panicked and ran to her workshop. 100 broken panes of glass were literally ringing like teeth around her. In those shards, she saw terrifying possibilities of who she could become: a queen, a tyrant, an absolute monster. In a moment of pure desperation, she slammed her bleeding hands into the broken glass, demanding to see the actual source of the lies. The shards bent inward like petals, absorbing her blood, turning into this intense red light. And then, every single reflection turned away from her. The raw human power had answered her call. Which brings us to a phrase that brilliantly illustrates the absolute central philosophy of our character going forward. Not all comfort is healing. This is the terrifying realization that essentially forces Mira to grow up and accept her role. She learns, the hard way, that some broken things actually do not want to be whole again. Instead, they want to ruthlessly show what that wholeness has been concealing all along. The demonic crowns were using perfect, comfortable, pretty images to hide their absolute hunger. From this moment on, Mira's power wasn't just about breaking glass anymore. It was entirely about breaking the lie. Let's move on to Section 2, Mechanics of Magical Reflection and Reversing the Lie. Now, for any student out there analyzing magic systems, this next part is absolutely crucial. You have to look at how her ability reacts fundamentally differently depending on whether she's facing demonic or angelic forces. It's a complete contrast. So, demonic crowns love projection, right? They thrive on making victims see enemies in their friends or seeing glory in blind obedience. Against them, Mira's mirror is an aggressive weapon. She performs a tactical reversal. She forces the demons to basically taste their own hunger, trapping them right inside the very fear they try to feed upon. It's brilliant. But flip the script. Against angelic or holy power, her mirror is completely useless as a weapon. Holy light passes straight through lies. When she actually tries to reflect it, her mind just fills with this overwhelming white silence. It's a hugely humbling lesson for her. Holy power cannot be stolen, and it cannot be bounced back. It absolutely must be received through surrender. We actually get to see this demonic weaponization perfectly executed when she goes up against the Borrower of Faces. Now, this specific demon didn't just steal physical bodies, it stole the fundamental meaning of a face. It could turn your most trusted friend into a complete stranger in your mind. It completely divided the town of Verglass by making everyone see a different, highly distorted version of Mira. But Mira didn't fight back by swinging a sword around. Instead, she stood in the town fountain, surrounded by broken glass, and simply asked the divided town to look at the reflection behind their own eyes. She fractured the demon's hold over them through the sheer, agonizing pain of self-recognition. And when the dust settled, the grand, terrifying demon was revealed as nothing but a trembling, hollow little thing that was just wearing stolen tenderness. That right there is how you reverse a lie. Let's shift gears to Section 3, Forging Alliances Through Truth and the Profound Isolation of Sight. When Mira starts dealing with other raw awakened humans, her life basically turns into extreme magical babysitting. And it creates this intense isolation for her because she is constantly revealing the hidden, often painful facets of her allies. Let's break down her collaborative training. When she meets Ilian Mar, his power profile is like a wild storm pressing outward, and Mira instantly sees every single way he might break. But instead of exploiting that, she guides him. She tells him to stop carrying so many different versions of himself and to recognize his true strength. Then there's Sela Vorn, whose power comes entirely from wounds. When Mira tries to reflect her, the mirror goes completely blank. From Sela, Mira learns the absolute necessity of consent. She learns that some sacred wounds do not want witnesses, and that having access to the truth isn't the same as having the right to view it. With Bran Inster, she reflects his immense physical force right back at him to show him that his anger is really just a shield guarding a much deeper fear. And finally, Nadir Kel, who controls total silence and missing rhythm. Through Nadir, Mira learns restraint. You can't reflect stillness by chasing it. You have to refuse to feed the movement of the enemy and become quiet yourself. Her true strength wasn't just exposing them, it was helping them manage their unique power profiles. Naturally, the demons realized this alliance was becoming way too powerful, so they pivoted to a new strategy: false selfhood. They specifically targeted human instability, and they whispered the absolute cruelest temptation directly to Mira. They told her that because she had this unique ability to reveal so many hidden truths, she therefore had the sovereign right to define, manage, and judge everyone around her. To prove it, the demon showed her reflections of her friends at their absolute worst, most vulnerable moments. And you know what the truly terrifying part was? The images weren't actually lies. They were true fragments, but they were arranged entirely without mercy. This was a massive defining test of her character and her internal boundaries. Moving into Section 4, the tactics of humble shards and reflecting consequence. This leads us to Mira's first truly great descent, standing completely alone in the Hall of 72 Broken Crowns. It's such a powerful scene. The demons are all gathered there trying to tempt her with everything: command, forbidden knowledge, pleasure, revenge, you name it. And what did Mira bring to this epic confrontation? She didn't bring a glowing, blessed sword. Nope. She brought a simple, everyday bag of broken mirrors that she had just collected from ordinary houses. We're talking about shards that had once reflected a baker checking for a flower on his cheek, or a tired mother braiding her daughter's hair. The demons, of course, laughed at these humble little fragments, but Mira just scattered them across the floor and demanded that the demons show themselves by what they had actually done to the small, everyday things of the world. And immediately, those grand, towering demonic illusions completely collapsed. The shards revealed the intimate ruins they had caused: the destroyed kitchens, the empty nurseries, the devastated sick rooms. She completely stripped them of their grandeur simply by reflecting the intimate consequences of their actions. It was a total tactical masterclass, using the most humble objects imaginable. Okay, let's actually break down her exact tactical method here, because it's fascinating. If you were writing a tactical guide for identifying demonic illusions using everyday reflective objects, it would be this exact 3-act process. Step 1. Identify the surface. You have to find exactly where the demonic power is trying to touch human perception. Step 2. Find the fracture. This means locating the logical contradiction between what the demon is claiming to offer and the reality of what it actually causes. And step 3, open the return. You create a path for that power to turn around and face its own moral source. So, for example, if a demonic command entered a town through the sin of pride, Mira returned it by exposing that exact pride. But, and this is a huge but, she had to execute this process without an ounce of anger or fear. If she slipped up, the mirror would just multiply her own dark emotions. She had to maintain this incredibly difficult emotional center, where she was honest enough to look at pure evil, yet humble enough not to imitate it. All right, section 5, the burden of empathy and maintaining personal boundaries. So this constant vigilance we just talked about, it exacted a really heavy emotional toll on Mira. To test her boundaries and make sure she wasn't slipping into tyranny, an angelic entity actually visits her workshop. It takes the form of this holy lantern that has no flame and no visible carrier holding it. Its light is incredibly soft, but the weird thing is, every single broken mirror in Mira's entire room instinctively turns away from it. Mira quickly realizes this wasn't some kind of reward or blessing. It was a highly deliberate test of her pride and the boundaries she had set for herself. The entity then asks her a very pointed question. What will you do with a light you cannot reflect? Mira's first instinct is to answer proudly. She says she will simply receive it. But the moment she says that, the lantern brightens aggressively, reflecting the subtle arrogance and pride in her answer. It shows her that simply assuming you can receive holy power can actually become a form of possession and entitlement. Recognizing her mistake, she corrects herself. She realizes that holy truth isn't an image you can control or bounce back. It's a relationship that has to be honored. So she changes her answer and says, I will stand where it allows me to stand. This entire profound encounter reinforces her ultimate defense against the manipulative influence of the crowns. Truth without compassion becomes another kind of distortion. This right here is such a vital takeaway for understanding her internal growth. She learns that wielding true fragments against someone without offering them any mercy or grace is literally just another form of demonic corruption. Being a true guardian of truth means having the wisdom to know when not to use it as a weapon against people who are already hurting. And that brings us to the moral boundaries she finally establishes for the rest of her life. Before the angelic entity leaves, it leaves this sentence physically burned into her wooden work table. Let the mirror serve the person, Never the wound, never the power, never itself. It's a rule to live by. And from that night onward, Mira actively chose to cover her mirrors whenever friends came to her in grief. She completely refused to uncover them unless the truth was absolutely needed, and more importantly, only when explicit consent had been honored. It's this beautiful balance of her immense revealing power with profound, deep empathy. She ensures she never becomes the very tyrant she's fighting against.
And finally, we reach Section 6, Witness to the Next Power, and the Archive of Refusal. As time went on and the raw awakened humans started forming circles for survival, Mira's role evolved again. She didn't become a military commander, and she refused to act as just a pure tactical weapon. Instead, she became a mature witness of human power. Before any major battle, her allies would come to her, but she wouldn't show them the future, because she knew that fear of the future inherently corrupts the future. Instead, she showed them their own false selves. She showed them the specific emotional distortion or weakness that was most likely to take control of them when they were under immense pressure. By showing them this before they ever set foot on the battlefield, they were able to recognize the lie internally before a demon could ever crown it and use it against them. Through this process, she created something called the Archive of Refused Reflections. Basically, these were incredibly potent visions and truths that she saw, but explicitly, intentionally chose not to reveal because she knew they would cause more harm than help. This right here is the ultimate literary culmination of her entire internal growth. She figured out that true mastery of her magic isn't about exposing everything just because you can. Power is proven not by what you expose, but by what you refrain from using. Learning to see without owning or exploiting is her ultimate triumph. Yet, the story doesn't end on a purely triumphant note. It actually concludes with a pretty chilling warning. At the very end of the Verglass campaign, Mira takes a moment to look deep into the very first mirror she ever broke. But instead of showing her the past or even the present reality, it shows her a vision. A doorway standing alone in a massive field of black salt. And the terrifying part? The door has no handle. Footprints approach it from every conceivable direction, but absolutely none leave. She realizes instantly that this isn't a memory. It's a warning. A new, raw human power is awakening somewhere out in the world. But unlike her power, which is all about scattering and reflecting light, this new power gathers. It pulls choices, names, and paths into one tightly closed place. It is essentially a prison. As Mira silently packs up her humble, broken shards and walks away from Verglass at dawn, finally reaching a point where she no longer casts a reflection herself, we as readers are left to ponder this massive question. If the next evolution of human power is literally a prison that consumes all choices and paths, how in the world will a guardian of truth survive when there is absolutely nothing left to reflect? It is such a haunting, provocative note to end on, but honestly, it perfectly encapsulates exactly why Mira's journey from a simple, humble mender to a disciplined, empathetic witness is just so incredibly compelling. Thank you all so much for exploring this amazing character arc with me today. Keep asking those hard questions, and I'll catch you guys in the next explainer.